Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of Performance and Finance Scrutiny, dated 17th of February. Should have started at 7 p.m. We are a minute late. This special call-in meeting, so subject matter is 1. Before we go on, I sincerely hope everyone has read agenda item 3. Sorry, apologies for absence. I forgot. Apologies for absence, please.
So we've had apologies from Councillors Allaway, Tapper, Galliford and Deach. And Councillor Barnett is substituting for Councillor Galliford. Councillor Bates is substituting for Councillor Allaway. And Councillor Fitzgerald is substituting for
He's not in today.
Councillor Tapper, and he's online virtually, so he can join in, but under the current rules, he can't vote
Indeed.
on any recommendations.
Okay. Declaration of interest. I see none. Now, let's go to page number 3, agenda item number 3. I sincerely hope everyone's read this because the rules have been set down very clearly. The rules, again, special rules from the chairman, no grandstanding, stick to your points, and hopefully we can all go home early. That's a general rule from the chair. If you are ready to move, it's very important for you all to actually understand this agenda item 3. Any questions on agenda item 3, please ask at this point. Catherine should be able to answer most of it. Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 4. Summary and purpose. Let me read that out first, and I'm going to then hand it over to the Nick Stevens or to Councillor Colin Dugan to carry on. Is it okay?
So you do, sorry, just to confirm, if you start, and then we have the members who've called it in first.
Okay.
Questions from them, if anyone has any questions from them. Then we go to Councillor Dugan as the executive portfolio holder, who will have a right to reply. Again, questions, and then we move into the debate and discussion.
All right. So, start with. Get back to this. Okay. We are going to hear evidence from the relevant parties. So let's actually start with the councillors who are called in. I'm going to ask Councillor Morgan Rice to speak. And you have got 8 minutes, Mr. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to keep it brief. I first want to start off by accepting the reality that the car parking charges may need to go up, and I accept the reality that for a long, long time this council hasn't raised them. However, I think that the decision that has been taken by the executive is not the best decision taken with the residents' interests in mind. And as noted on my call-in sheet, I did lay out a few areas. So firstly is the impact on residents. Number one, the costs of car parking is going to increase, which will impact residents using, especially the village services, to use village shops, and also it will impact on residents by the inevitable increase of on-street parking by people who use their cars to avoid parking in car parks. And I think with the result of the removal of all-day free parking, or the 18 hours as it is in some car parks, we will see car users using on-street parkings in surrounding areas which are already oversubscribed in terms of parking. There's also the impact on businesses, especially in the villages. I'm going to be focusing on the non-town centre areas of the borough for this. I think it's very clear that village residents rely on the car parks at times to use the shops in many areas. Some areas are very out of the way. In parts of the borough, it's not a simple walk to the shops at times. And also, it's the businesses that rely on the car parks for their customers as well. And I think to ensure that we have a viable village economy in our borough, which I'm sure this council wants, that it's about enabling people to use those shops rather than placing barriers in front of them. And I need not remind everyone that we have very poor public transport links in our borough. So if we are going to actually impress on residents to be getting rid of their cars and to use public transport, I think it's a bit rich when we don't have very good buses that are very regular. I also want to address that, in my opinion, there's been a lack of consultation on this issue. This is a major change to the way of life in the villages across the borough. I think a lot of residents have come to expect the car parks as they are, and that it's become a part of the way they live their lives. As far as I saw, there was no real consultation from the council on this. I think it was as shown by many councillors in this chamber who carried out their own consultation work, that the council itself didn't consult on such a major change to the way we run our car parks. And I think it would be important for the council to carry out a consultation on a service that is widely used. I wonder if we were to hike up charges on another well-used service in the borough, would we do so without consultation? Also, ward councillors have been largely left out of this decision, and I would ask that any move forward would include consultation with ward councillors on the provision of car parks within their wards, because, as we all know, they will have the best understanding of their wards and how that car park is used on a day-to-day basis. I also want to address that I'm not opposed to increasing car parking charges. I accept that at times the council may have to do this to cover costs. But however, I have yet to see, and I mentioned this in my call-in sheet, I believe, that there has been, in the executive papers, there was talk of the costs of the car park. But at no point was there ever an itemised outlay of what those costs were. If we are to increase the car parking charges to cover the costs of the car parks, what, in a sense, is the increase going to be paying for? Because in many of the car parks across the borough, especially my one, for example, in ones in my ward and near my ward, there are no there are no machines to maintain. So and I wonder if this is increasing, and by the rate that we are expecting the income for it to generate, I want to know what that is actually going to be paying for, because unless we're using the money from car parking to fill in other budget deficits, I think that's really clear that we have to identify this, and that's another reason why I decided to call this in. As a part of this calling procedure, I would actually like to impress on the decision maker to take this back and to review. And I'm not sure how this properly works in terms of if it's a full recommendation or if it's just a recommendation for Councillor Dugan to take back. My recommendation would be that the reviews this to amend the recommendation to separate the town centre car parking charges from the village car parking charges, that all car parking charges be consulted with residents and ward councillors, and that the Ringo convenience charge not be passed on to customers. Because if we are going to be moving to a digital ticketless system, I think we should be encouraging that and making that the cheapest option possible. So it's the impact on residents, the impact on businesses, and it's the residents that have spoken to me and residents across the borough that have spoken to me regarding this, and businesses that I've been in contact with, and residents that have highlighted the businesses that they've spoken to, all say that the car parking charge increase will affect their businesses and their use of retail provision within villages outside of the town centre in a negative way. It will place barriers on our village way of life across the borough, not only in the 6 villages to the east, but also in villages like my own, like Jeepcut, like Frimley Green, like Mitchett. So I think it's really important that we look at a more holistic way to this. Would it be more appropriate to have the car parking charges be increased in the town centre, which is where the majority of the income generated will be coming from, and to have a wider look at the village car parks, which are mainly used by businesses in the villages and by residents. And that's what I would like to impress upon the executive portfolio holder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. I think if you want, you don't have any witnesses on the sheet, so I presume you're speaking on behalf of Councillor Tapper as well, so that we can get that out of the way. Thank you. Next is Councillor Wheeler.
Councillor Gordon has put his hand up.
He has.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take questions once you've done all this bit.
I think let's do all the thing and take the questions in one go. That'll be easier for the portfolio holder to answer. Yeah. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. So much as I have full sympathy for and allegiance with the matters that have been raised in Councillor Rice's call-in, I'm very supportive both from a village's business's point of view. The situation in Chobham is slightly different, and it is based, and my call-in is very much based on the impact that this will have, potential impact that this will have on the SSI in Chobham Common. And additionally, we are not disputing the increase in other charges. Whereas in Knoll Road, the increase for 3 hours is 23%, the increase in Chobham for 3 hours is over 400%. So we have a 400% increase in the cost of parking for 3 hours in Chobham. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is a fairly sizable contribution to trying to cope with some of the deficit that this council has in trying to make its books balance. There is, as has been stated, because nobody was unaware of the fact that I was going to be contesting this, there is no absolute requirement to provide free car parking for SANGs. However, in the business case that was put forward by this borough for Chobham Water Meadows SANGs, it clearly stated that it did an assessment on car parking, it met the needs of car parking, and in addition to that, within the business case, it said, and I will just quote, that the status quo would remain. So I'm sorry, bear with me, I had just taken a photograph of it. And here we go. No, can't find it. But basically it stated that the status quo would remain. So therefore, within the business case, they weren't looking to have to spend money on car parking. They weren't looking to have to improve the car parking, but they made a statement in that business case that the status quo would remain. And I have to say, in addition to that, the figures that are presented by the council to justify the increase and the expected revenue are somewhat flawed, because what we have is the evidence of the number of people that requested 2-hour car parking slot. We have absolutely no information to say whether or not those people will actually, how many of those people do actually need the parking for 2 hours and how many need it for 1 hour. So the assumption around the income increase is at best flawed, and at worst very creative accounting. And we are all fully aware of the fact that this council has a very poor record when it comes to expected income as a result of car parking charges. For SANGs, the purpose of SANGs is that it should be a more attractive alternative to using the SSSI. If we increase the parking, if we decrease the number of 2 hours parking, we have no evidence to know what the impact on people's movements will be to move them across to the SANGs. But what we do know is that when car parking charges were introduced onto the common, people walked elsewhere. The car parks were empty and the common was empty. From an ecological point of view, absolutely fantastic. From an access to common land and from the rights of people to access the common, not a great thing. The area is very heavily used by people that are walking dogs. The other site, before anybody mentions it, that we have in Chobham at the Valley End Woods is actually adjacent to the common. So although it produces and provides alternative SANGs for people within the vicinity for using the common, actually a lot of people park there and cross the road and go onto the common because for a variety of reasons, Valley End Woods is famous for a different type of dog exercise, for wanting to be discreet in my meaning behind that. So we do not have evidence that this car parking charges will come up with the revenue that is expected. We do not have evidence to see how many of those people that take that 2-hour ticket only park for 1 hour. We do have a 400% increase in that 3-hour car parking charge, which if we were to be equitable across the borough, presumably should be transferred to all of the other car parks where we know there would be an awful lot more revenue. Well, no, we don't know. Let's face it, we don't know. But we would hope that there would be more people to park. But fundamentally, this was not evidence in the business case when Chobham Water Meadows came forward. Within the business case, we said that the situation would remain, and we have absolutely no evidence to say that this will not have a detrimental impact on the SSSI by changing people's habits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheeler. There is no, do you have any witness? Letter from the Parish Council.
Councillor Tedder is online.
Thank you. Councillor Tedder, would you like to say something on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as I've just heard, I trust everyone's seen the letter from the Parish Council because they are also very much concerned about the increase. But I think the biggest concern is the loss of the 2 hours. The car park in Chobham is rather unique, and it is the backbone of the village because we have very little, if any, well, we have very little on-street parking. So the car park is a great need for everybody, and in particular for mums dropping off children at school. And anybody volunteering at the school finds that they generally have to go for 2 hours. So now we're going to say, well, if it's only 1 hour, all these volunteers are going to have to pay for the privilege of volunteering. And that doesn't seem right in a village where people are trying to help the community. We have the same thing with the church. The church do lots of groups for the more vulnerable. People bring the old to the church, bring people who can't get there, the infirm, and park, and they need the 2 hours free because once again, we're charging volunteers to volunteer. And that can't be right in village life because we need to build up communities, and especially now when people have been locked in for so long. I'm not going to talk about the SANGs because Councillor Wheeler has gone through it, and I can't see that there's any benefit of me going all over that again. The only thing I would say is that when the SANGs was put forward and there was going to be the parking, there was much debate at the time, and it was considered that probably 30% of the car park would be used by dog walkers. And I think by the huge amount of people that use that car park, That is probably true. Now, it would have cost the council, by whichever pot of money they had to take it out of, the cost of doing the car park and the cost of upkeeping that car park. So could it not be considered that perhaps the Green Space team or SILS, wherever the money comes from for doing the sayings, could make a contribution to Chobham, and we could retain our 2 hours free, which I think is vitally important because of the sayings, because of the common, and because of all the volunteers and all the people who have to use it, not because of out of choice, but because they have nowhere else. They've got to park there to take their children to school. They've got to park there to go to church. And they've got to park there if they volunteer because there's nowhere else. So I would ask that this is looked at again and actually look at the car parks, possibly individually, because as Councillor Wheeler said, we're looking at tying it up the town car parks. All village car parks are different. They need different things. And Chobham needs its car park because there's no buses. We're pretty tied. And I think, this has been poorly thought out. I'm not against the charging on Saturdays. I'm not against increasing the charge because, I think it's been about 10 years since it was put up. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't even have a problem with charging on Sundays, but I do have a problem with the 2 hours. And I think for village life and for the sake of the common, we need to retain that in Chobham. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tidder. Next, we have Councillor Betton, who is also online.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to take a leaf out of Councillor Wheeler's book. And I'm concerned with Frimley Green. I'm not concerned with the town centre. Town centre car parks are one thing. Village car parks and car parking in Frimley Green is something very different. When this initiative was first proposed, I visited every single business, not resident, business in Frimley Green, and I spoke to them. I won't insult your intelligence by claiming that they're all concerned, because some are not. Some have their own parking, but those that are going to be adversely affected are very concerned. I'm thinking of the NHS dentist that is in the parade of shops in Frimley Green, where there is no alternative parking for either their clients or their staff. And it's their staff that they're worried about, in that they will have to park there every day. At the moment, it costs nothing. It's going to make a huge increase in their costs of running the business. And anyone who's run a business knows that what you do when your costs go up, you look at ways of remediating that. And moving is something that you can do. You can go to a house if you're a dentist. Penny Hill Dentist Centre is a house on the Bagshot Road with car parking in the garden. Currently, the people of Frimley Green can walk to their dentist, but if the staff are unable to park, they will have to go elsewhere. Then there is the shop opposite the dentist. That is a one-stop with no parking. People go into the Wharf Road car park there, whip across the road, buy what they need and go away again. If people have to pay or they can't get in there, what's to stop them driving 2 minutes down the road to Tesco's in Balmoral Drive? Absolutely nothing. The beauty parlours, there are several in Frimley Green, are very concerned again. Their energy prices are going up hugely. Hairdryers, I guess, use a lot of electricity. And some of their clients are there for quite a considerable time. I know if I went, I'd be there for a long time. It would take a long time to get me sorted out. But over 2 hours is not uncommon. It's not for everybody that it is a concern, but it's for businesses that have been struggling for the past 2 years with limited income that are now going to have yet another cost thrown on them, another disincentive for their clients to go to their local shop, where they can go to other, Sainsbury's, Tesco's. These large supermarkets all have free car parks. There must be something in that they provide car parking for free to encourage their clients. Treating the villages, and in particular Frimley Green, like the town centre is wrong. I asked the Section 151 officer 2 weeks ago for some information about parking and car parking and so on and so forth, especially for today's meeting. He hasn't been able to give me that information. I mean, budgets have been going on, he's been busy. He's promised it by the end of this week, which is tomorrow. But that's not the concern. The concern is that the questions I have asked, he has to get the data for. They weren't therefore available for consideration by the executive when they put these fees up. So I would ask the executive to look again at this issue of car parking. Frimley Green is a special case because there is no real place for on-street parking. The roads are very narrow. There is a space for 4 cars outside the little parade of shops. There's a space for about 5 cars outside the one stop on the other side of the green. But for everything else, they use the car park in Wharf Road. And I've heard it said that the idea of 1 hour will be okay because that'll free up spaces. I've lived in my house since 1984. I have been going to Wharf Road car park in all that time, and I have never not been able to find a car park space in that car park. I think people are making a case for a problem that does not exist. I would therefore ask that the executive divorce parking in villages from parking in the town centre. The amount of money that they're likely to raise from the village car parks is minuscule in comparison, but the loss of services to those villages is far more significant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Betton. Now, we've had all the people who called in to speak. I presume none of you have any witnesses. Nope, not on the sheets anyway. Off we go. No. Oh, sorry. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gordon.
Oh, yeah. Not a question, just more of a comment, really. I run one of the main businesses in Bagshot, right in the middle of High Street, and I've spoken to a lot of business owners who are quite relieved.
Sorry, Councillor Gordon, if it's a statement, can we wait till once you finish all the process and then we can debate it with your comments, if you don't mind?
I've literally got to shoot out the door, so if it's going to be 30 seconds, that's okay, then I can go, if that's all right. Would you mind?
No, carry on.
All I'm saying so far, I've had no negative feedback at all from any of the businesses in Bagshot, which surprised me. They're all pleased they've kept the 1 hour parking as a result of not being charged at all. So they're quite pleased with that one. So the feedback from Bagshot has been surprisingly positive. So that's my comment. That's it.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question, if that's okay, because I do agree there's a split between town and villages. Can I just clarify? I think Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Tedder made it very clear, but just for the benefit, if I can particularly ask Councillor Rise and Councillor Betton, in terms of the call-in and your comments, you particularly focused on the villages. Are you, at this moment in time, objecting to the proposed charges in relation to the town centre, so specifically Main Square and Knoll Road? Because if you're not, we might be able to save quite a lot of time tonight.
Yes, Councillor Rice.
No.
Councillor Batten.
Not at all.
Councillor Wheeler.
No.
Councillor Tedder.
No. No objection to the town's parking.
But the chair may have an objection to it, but I don't know whether the chair can object to it or not. Say whatever you like. Okay, thank you very much. I don't want to break the rules here. So I'm going to jump in now, if you don't mind. I also did a survey, quite disappointed that the councillors were not consulted or the residents were not consulted in full. So I took it upon myself to actually walk down the high street, along with a friend, both sides of the high street, and interviewed literally every single business owner and the shop. People say it's not surprising. All of them objected to the fact that there was going to be an increase. And I did ask them the most obvious question, would you like free parking for a short period? And all of them said yes, except for one gentleman who was not the shop owner, he was the manager here. He was quite happy to pay for it because he wanted to pay for the new pavement. Other than that, the whole of the town centre I have surveyed, which I got documents of, they objected to the fact that there was going to be a charge, an increase in charge. When I suggested, would you like a 1 hour, I suggested this, 1 hour free, all of them said yes, because they feel they're, like Councillor Batten spoke for Frimley Green, they spoke on behalf of the town centre businesses. They said, we've had a tough 2 years, we want to try and recoup some of it back, and we don't want to we don't want to give the customers a hard time or for them to give a discount on the charges the council may raise on them. So I would actually strongly suggest we address the car parking, both car park, the main car park and the Knoll Road car park, for 1 hour free. I have no problem charging, absolutely none whatsoever. I want to protect the businesses within the town centre. So if you are going to charge, for example, the second hour £2.25 or £2.50, go for it. Then on average, if some person stays over an hour, goes into the second hour, on average, they will still pay only £1.25. So that's the way I've looked at the maths. Thank you very much.
Can I raise a point of order? My understanding is that we've had 5 people who've called this matter in, and none of them have raised concern regarding the town centre. Now, I appreciate that you have. You didn't actually call it in.
No, I did not. That's the reason I asked that I could.
I understand that, but my understanding at that point is, therefore, that at this point in the meeting, we don't have any objections from any of the people who've called it in with regard to the town centre charges. We have, and I think, bearing in mind 5 councillors have raised a number of points
No,
that
it's a
would
valid
need to be
point.
addressed. So, I mean, it's obviously for you, but I just wonder if
you raised a
perhaps we
valid
should-
point.
Okay.
The calling particularly were addressed on this particular point, so it's a valid point you raised. But since I was able to speak, I gave my view on the car parking charges. Thank you.
I have to say I concur with your opinion, Councillor Bates. So, I mean, you know, people who've called it in are happy with the town centre aspects. I think the meeting would probably just focus on the village aspects. So, if everyone is in agreement.
I mean, as a chair, I agree. As a chair, I agree. So there are more no more discussions.
Just from my own understanding, on a point of clarification, that while I have no objection to the town centre, obviously the recommendation that I'm making is clear that it that the village, the non-town centre car parks need to be separated from. So obviously, while that's still the town centre is still a part of the entire discussion, I'm just want to clarify my.
It would be separated. Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Chairman, before we move away from the town centre, can I just say that we do have free parking all around the town centre on Camberley High Street, it goes out a long way, that free parking. I know the county council are looking actually putting charging points in those areas for quite a while, but it was decided not to because it was giving people and clients up to 2 hours free parking. So we do have free car parking in a lot of roads around the town centre, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say something specifically about the car park in Wharf Road in Frimley Green. But as I understand the order of proceedings, that would be when we get to the debate. So I'm not going to make any comment at this stage, and I think we should move on.
That's exactly where we are heading. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Black. That's exactly where we're heading. I'm ticking it off here. And Councillor Bates, you raise a valid point, because I got the permission from the rest of the crowd. I said I had what I had to say. And no witnesses, right. Committee members may ask questions of the conclusion of evidence.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Dugan has right.
Councillor Dugan, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've tried to group the comments from the Colin papers themselves into sort of a logical, because there is an amount of overlap, but not. And you know, Council has been very specific about specific areas, but I think the comments are nonetheless relatively generic. But I'm going to start with Chobham, and then specifically the Sangs. So I took on board the comments about the Sangs that were made at the executive meeting. And we have reached out to Natural England and had a conversation with them about our plans. We've told them that the intention is to reduce car parking, free car parking from 2 hours to 1 hour. They have verbally not raised any objections at all. We're now asking them for a written response to that, to our plan. Their comment, oddly enough, was that the Sang is relatively small, and at the end of the day, that's what we're providing the car parking for, is for the Sang. And it's about a 2.5 kilometre circuit. Sangs are meant to be circuits. One learns something every day. In fact, I took my dogs for a walk there yesterday morning. I can attest to the lovely bridges, but it's very, very muddy. And I walked round in just under half an hour. So what I'm proposing that the executive will do with Chobham right now is that we're going to put a pin in Chobham. We will leave Chobham as is until such time as we have a written response from Natural England that either supports the move to 1 hour or doesn't. If it doesn't, then clearly we have some work to do. My belief is, based on, as I say, the conversation, and it's not just any random person, this is the guy that we deal with Natural England when we have planning issues, etc. And assuming he comes back and says that it is okay, then the executive will go back to reducing the free parking from 2 hours to 1. So I think that covers off most of the comments around the Sangs element of Chobham. So I guess the first piece is that, you know, from Councillor Rice's call-in paper, that this is going to have an impact on residents. There is no doubt this will have an impact on residents that use the car park. The whole purpose of this paper is to put charges up. There is a flip side to that, however. The car parks are subsidised currently. In particular, the rural car parks are all subsidised by the other car parks that, when in non-COVID times, would create a surplus for the budget. But nonetheless, the rural car parks are subsidised. And so the residents of the borough are subsidising the use of the car parks by car park users. Again, the report, I mean, I guess for an accuracy perspective, the costs of the car parks by car park themselves were outlined in the executive paper Annex 3. There's not a massive breakdown, but it gives you the main items. The biggest cost in all of the well, not all, but almost all of the car parks, in fact, is just simply the rates charged that we're levied by government for a car park. So yes, there is an impact on residents, but equally one could contend by charging the users a more appropriate charge for the use of the service. It also has a positive impact on residents that aren't therefore subsidising that use. And again, I make the point, we're putting up the price of the car parking in the rural areas in order to cover the costs. And on the projections that we make, and I might point out, these are projections made by our professional officers who have worked in the parking service for many, many years, that all but one of the rural car parks will still make a loss when you look at that car park. There's a comment, Councillor, you didn't raise it, I don't think, in what you were saying today, but it's raised in your paper, that there will be an impact on local amenities and green spaces. I mean, as is quite clear from the paper, we will continue to provide 1 hour of free parking provision. And in fact, the access to any of these services doesn't change. The access is the same, just that the parking charging regime changes. And again, it's not a major change. There is still free parking in all of the car parks where there's free parking today. In fact, oddly enough, with the exception, I know we're not going to talk about town centre car parks, but currently we provide 2 hours in Knoll Road, which is free, and that is one of the recommendations in the paper that will be removed. It is of note that even though we provide free car parking at Knoll Road car park isn't full, and people happily use the town centre car park and pay for it, even when a couple of 100 yards away there is a free car park. Poor consultation with residents and businesses. So the council doesn't consult on all of the decisions that the council makes. It has just undertaken, probably it's, I think, regarded it's probably its most successful and extensive consultation that we've ever undertaken, where we went out on the 5-year plan recently. And the feedback from that, I think, one of the process, but also the feedback from residents has been largely positive. But nowhere in that feedback does it talk about car parking. It talks about safety. It talks about providing services for the vulnerable, etc. It hasn't raised car parking. I took on board at the last meeting that we should talk to ward councillors about the car parks in their wards going forward, and that is something that we will do. A bit like Councillor Malvaganam's survey of the high street businesses, if we ask local councillors what, I guess the simple question, do you think we should put charges up? I'm fairly willing to bet that I know what the answer will be. The impact on rural and village life, again, I don't concur. As I say, the change in the regime in all of these car parks is relatively limited. We're reducing free parking from 2 hours to 1 hour, and we're putting the prices up. We're putting up the prices, as Councillor Wheeler says. If you look at it from a percentage perspective, it is significant. It's 50 pence an hour. We're going to charge 50 pence an hour to park in these car parks. And you will still have the opportunity to park for 1 hour for free. I don't really, and actually, even if we do charge 50 pence an hour for those car parks, all bar one, will continue to make a loss. Increase on on-street parking in residential areas. So I think it was Councillor Rise that said that there's already, I think the on-street parking is already oversubscribed. What changing the regime, the parking charging regime will do is increase churn. So whilst there may be more, there clearly is currently on-street parking. If the car parking, the amount of free car parking is reduced, and if you look at Wharf Road in particular, it is that there is no longer free car parking, there will be greater churn in those car parks. Residents won't need to park on street, they'll be able to park in the car parks. Now, to be fair, that's going to be displaced by the people who are currently parking there all day free of charge. But there will be churn. And it's also just worth pointing out, it's not illegal to park on street. It's, as long as your vehicle is taxed and got an MOT, you can park it wherever you want as long as it's done legally. In the paper, but again not raised this evening, there was a comment about lack of civil enforcement officers. I think, again, as I outlined when the paper went to executive, the civil enforcement officers visit these car parks every single day. They're not there all the time. They can't stand guard on every single car parking space and issue tickets when someone stays over. But the car parks are on a sort of a random basis to maximise the risk, I guess, to drivers parking in the car parks of not paying. Car parking is largely self-regulated. You can go into a car park, as a pay and display car park, and you choose not to pay if you want, if you're going to take the risk. But we have a team of officers that visit all of these car parks every day to try and ensure that people are getting the tickets, in case of free parking, still getting a ticket, but not overstaying the time that they're there, and paying when they're not. And largely that works. That's just the way parking works. And again, the information about, where there's insufficient information about where a parking surplus would go. So the parking service contributes to the council's budget. It doesn't contribute to individual services. But without the surplus, the budget's under greater pressure, and then the council has to make decisions about what it's going to do the services for which it pays. But there's not a, it pays for meals at home. There's not a, it pays to subsidise the theatre. There's not a, it contributes to the budget. So there is no more information to give you other than to pass you back to the council's budget paper, which shows you what we spend our revenue on, or our cash on. I think I've covered all of the points now that were on the call-in papers. Let me just have a quick look through my notes. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of process, Councillor Rise, this isn't to me. I'm not the executive. I'm just the portfolio holder with the pleasure of sitting in front of you this evening. This committee will send its comments and observations to the executive for the executive to consider. Councillor Wheeler. I think I've covered all of your points, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor
Dugan, if I may come in, you haven't. So one of the fundamental points was in that the justification for that area of Sangs throughout the document and throughout the business case that was presented to this council, and on which evidence this council agreed to go forward with the purchasing of it, was that when it related to car parking, in about 5 different places within that document, it said that we would maintain current. And the other point that hasn't been addressed is the fact that we have absolutely no evidence to say that of the 74,807 two-hour tickets that are issued, that we have no evidence to say which of those are people that are staying 1 hour and which of those are people staying 2 hour. And yet we have made an assumption on the revenue that we will get revenue as a result of that. So we've not addressed the business case. I welcome your comments to wait for a report back from Natural England, albeit late. And I appreciate that you've contacted Natural England. It's something that I'm sure that the Thames Heath Basin Special Protection Group, and it's something that Surrey Wildlife Trust, I'm assuming, have also been consulted, or I hope that they've been consulted, in terms of their much more local knowledge and understanding of the impact on the Sang. So I hope we're not just going to wait or rely on Natural England's statement, but that part hasn't been addressed. And also with respect, Councillor Dugan, although you enjoyed your walk, you are able-bodied, and had you known the area a little bit better, you would have realised that the area of Sangs links to a huge number of footpaths that are very regularly used, that actually give us a number of 10-kilometre circular routes, and I think there are 9 5-kilometre circular routes from that car park which start within the Sangs.
I can indeed, yeah. So the business case may well state that it says that we should retain the status quo. I have to say I haven't read that in detail. Nonetheless, we will consult with Natural England, and if they tell us that for the 2.5-kilometre circular route of the Sang, for which we're providing the car parking, that we can reduce the car parking to 1 hour, then we will.
You are jeopardising the common and the SSSI, and we have to accept that within this council.
I'm sure, Councillor Wheeler, if Natural England believe that that is the case, they'll tell us that we can't reduce car parking from 2 hours till 1, won't they? So we're not providing car parking for people to do 10-kilometre routes. We're providing car parking for a 2.5-kilometre circular Sang route. The 1 hour, 2 hour, you're right, we don't have data that supports exactly what's 1 hour and what is 2 hour. However, we do have a very experienced professional parking team who have made their best assessment on what they think will happen were the charging to go from 2 hours free to 1 hour free. Councillor Tedder, again, I took on board the volunteering element that you mentioned for the school. I don't think we need to worry about the mums. 1 hour free parking should be more than sufficient time to go to school, drop your child off and come back. My understanding is for volunteering is that there is already an agreement between the parking team and the school. I'm happy to pass to Mr. Leal in a moment. And if there isn't, Mr. Leal has been on holiday, unfortunately, and I haven't spoken to him up until he's sitting right next to me. If there isn't, there will be a volunteering pass scheme for volunteers at the school in Chobham. And I think that's from your perspective. In fact, let me just quickly, because I don't want to lose it, but can I refer to Mr. Leal too?
Absolutely, go
on
for
that
it.
particular comment?
Yeah, so we don't have any volunteers arrangements with the schools because the 2 hour parking at the moment provides enough parking. We've not had a request from the schools. If we need to put one in, we can put one in quite quickly and quite simply.
And just for clarity on that, it's not if, we will, Councillor Tedder, put in a volunteers scheme for volunteers at Chobham Primary School. I think I've covered, Councillor Betton, most of your points there, really to do with the, what is there an impact on business? I have no doubt that businesses would prefer that there's free parking. I have no doubt that businesses would prefer that parking charges didn't go up. But this council needs to cover the costs of its service, and it needs to provide its contribution that this service normally provides to the budget. I remind you that in your chosen car park, Frimley Green, the price was set in 2009 and it hasn't been changed since. And the car park doesn't, the car parks, the rural car parks and plain estate parks do not cover their costs. And that is it, I think.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dugan. Very comprehensive. I think you have covered most of the points, even if my memory is bad.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt you. May I just come back? We heard that about the school, but what about the church? Because they're equally using volunteers and the museum. There's numerous things in Chobham. It's not just the school. And I doubt very much whether an hour is enough for mums, because that is a very, very important social meeting place outside schools. And it really does need the 2 hours. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Councillor Dugan.
I disagree.
Councillor Tedham, it's been a very short reply back to you. I don't know whether you want to say anything or put it in writing. I'd suggest you not. You made your point. I would actually put something in writing to them or bring it up during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was not on mic. Committee members, you may ask questions at this point, or you may skip. Entirely up to the committee members on the same points, not the relevant stuff points. Yeah, no, that point comes, then the debate comes. It's a committee member time. I see none whatsoever. Excellent. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask the portfolio holder on the Annex 3, the costs of and income of the car parks, where it's got the line premises. I mean, the rates that we have to pay is self-explanatory. The premises, is that the cost of maintaining and repairing and keeping these premises safe for the users?
Yeah, on the whole, the answer is yes, but for precision, I shall ask Mr. Leal to respond, please.
Yeah, so the premises costs are everything to do with buildings and the land. So it'll be maintaining the lifts, maintaining the equipment on the car parks, the fire alarm systems in the multi-stories, as well as fixing and repairing potholes in the other surface car parks.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you. Can I ask, why was there no consultation with ward members? I mean, I've listened carefully to a number of points which seem very specific, and it's have come up now and during the original meeting. Why was there no consultation with the members of particularly Chobham and particularly Wharf Road?
I don't know, as a practice, we've done that before when we've consulted on car parking charges. As I say, going forward, we will.
But I have to say, I find that astonishing, if I'm blunt with you. I thought it was a matter of practice that any matter that related to a situation in the ward, that ward members would be automatically consulted. So it does. So in essence, am I right to say that the position of you or the executive was not to consider any views from ward members prior to your decision of the executive?
The parking team didn't consult with ward councillors, correct?
Can I make an observation here, please? I mean, I've listened to quite a bit of this debate. What actually is very, I mean, I agree with Councillor Bates on most things, this one in particular. The paper says, and you have said it as well today, that no car parks rises are not taking place for a few years now. It's being raised this year. I would have thought it's sensible, would have been sensible and more democratic. In fact, I remember Councillor Deach making a big speech on it, as to ward councillors were not consulted. Again, Councillor Bates has raised it, and quite a few of the other councillors have raised the same point. Personally, I would recommend that the executive takes it away, thinks about it, and tries to implement this, not only for car park, for other matters as well, where things doesn't come up regular, but comes up infrequently. It's very, very important that the councillors or ward councillors are fully consulted. Any other questions or comments from the committee members? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make an observation on that. I think Councillor Dugan did earlier on say that he had taken on board that. But can I just follow your line of thinking here? So are you saying that any decision that has to be taken by this council in any forum, ward councillors should be consulted? I just want to narrow that down, you see, because suddenly I could see us chasing our tails, consulting.
Let me answer that from my point of view. I don't know about other members. I did say infrequently, where things happen infrequently, like this car parking. It didn't happen so many years. It's happening now. It seems sensible, that's the words I used, I think, sensible to consult the ward councillors at this stage, because they are there in the front. All of a sudden, prices go up or whatever happens in their ward, they're not responsible. Their residents would be asking the questions of them. So it would be good practice, let me put it this way, it would be good practice for the exec to refer some of it to the, if not, I agree with you, they'll have to come back to the councils every time. That's not the way exec should work.
Yeah, can I just come back? And I was getting very twitchy here, that suddenly there's a planning application in a ward or an area that hasn't been considered. That's infrequent. So, you know, members have the opportunity of commenting. There was enough debate about this in advance of, and I know some of my colleagues made representations to Councillor Dugan quite forcefully on areas. I don't have we don't have any car, we have one car park, I think, still there, that has been developed. But we made representations, and I think all councillors had that opportunity, being aware that this was coming, to make representation. I don't know how many did, but thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Garrett and then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on that point about speaking to ward members. If we'd actually done this right, we would have looked at the price increases on an annual basis, in which case we wouldn't be where we are now. Are we saying that on an annual basis we will be wanting to discuss with ward members the price increases in car parks?
Councillor Garrett, if you had listened to me carefully, I said infrequently.
Yeah, but we shouldn't have to discuss this annually. So it would literally.
No, sorry. I'm not going to go around circles in a circuit anymore. I actually said where things don't happen, where things happen infrequently, it would be good practice to get back to the ward councillors. That's all I said, and that's a recommendation from the chair. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you. Now, usually I would be very happy to listen to the views of Councillor Garrett as my ward member, but he was actually on the executive, and I'm not actually sure it's appropriate for him to try and intervene tonight, actually. It's quite right that Councillor Dugan does, because as decision maker, but in effect we're scrutinising that decision, and he was one of the decision makers. So whilst it's right that he kind of watches, to which I have no objection, it could be argued that he is trying to influence this committee, which would of course be wrong. The point I did want to make, actually, are we going on to the debate now?
Yes, we are going on to the debate.
I think in terms of what I've heard anyway, we seem to have clarified it down to 2 car parks, which are Chobham and Wharf Road. And I think from what I've heard, there are some wider points that have been raised in relation to things like the Ringo charge and things. But the 2 main issues appear to me, anyway, to be those specific car parks. And based on what I've heard, I think the local members for those areas have got a point. And I think, and I'm glad we've clarified the point earlier. So from the financial point of view, the town centre, I don't think we should be stopping any further now. I think that the executive should be allowed to implement that, and we should let them get on with that. But in terms of these 2 car parks, I do think they need to be revisited. We've already heard that the executive want to revisit Chobham, and so in essence that decision is easy, because that is something that they've already saying they want to do, to wait for this letter, to consult with Natural England, who presumably weren't consulted in the first place, so that a business plan can be read that, as we've heard tonight, hasn't been read. And it's quite obvious that in Chobham, further work needs to take place before that decision is decided upon. So to me, that is blindingly obvious that has to go back to the executive as a decision. In regard to the Frimley Green one, I personally am minded, I've listened carefully, obviously I'll hear what Councillor Black has to say. He may have a different view, I don't know. But there does appear to have been some local issues here that don't appear to have been fully considered. It has been recognised, and in fairness to Councillor Dugan, he did make this point at the original meeting, that ward councillors should, there have been lessons here to learn about ward council consultation. I would take issue with what Councillor Hawkins said, because of course members are consulted in terms of planning applications. They do get the weekly application list. They're also advised about pre-applications. Members are aware and have every opportunity as ward members to comment on applications at the earliest time. What appears to have happened, I say, only based on what I've listened to, it doesn't impact on me, but the ward members were not given the opportunity in these 2 locations to have the same degree of knowledge. If they had done, I suspect the executive would have taken it seriously. I note, for example, they did so in Deep Cut. So the ward member in Deep Cut did take the opportunity of raising local knowledge, and that was listened to, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen, or didn't appear to happen in these 2 car parks. So my own view is that I think both of these 2 car parks should go back, and the executive be asked to revisit that. And in Chobham's case, they want to do so anyway. But that we allow the executive to continue with the other car parks. We've heard from the bag shop member, he doesn't have any issue. It does appear to just be these 2, Chobham and in Wharf Road. And I think they do need further looking at. And my view is I think that those 2 should be asked to be revisited and the rest of the decision be enacted.
Councillor Black.
Thank you. I'd just like to give you a different perspective on the Wharf Road car park in Frimley Green. I share the concerns about the risk of dislocation of parking to residential streets. And I also acknowledge that the changes that are proposed are not universally popular with the 14 businesses that I personally visited and gave them a copy of the paper the very day after publication of the original report in December. However, I think I need to balance my judgment with the fact, and this may be a moot point, that this car park has not functioned well as a car park for residents for many years. A car park works when you can drive into it looking for a space and you can find a space. And this car park does not work in that respect. It creates more congestion as residents then look somewhere else for a space. the commensurate impact on the environment, and the inevitability they will park elsewhere, as Councillor Duggan pointed out. So, and this isn't just my data, you know, living in Frimley Green for 20 years, it's, and I go past that car park between 2 and 4 and 6 times a day. When I talked to Mr. Leal about this, he gave me some of the data. He'd done surveys on how how well used that car park is, and that backs up what I observe every single day. And maybe there is a need to establish what the facts are. But I'm very clear on my perspective of the facts. So I think we face a decision whether to continue to ignore the fact this car park doesn't function, and has been the case for most of the 20 years I've lived in Frimley Green, or we decide to do something about it. And from the dialogue that I've had with the officers, including Mr. Leal, the parking team leader, I understand that similar problems were experienced in the past at car parks in Chobham, Bagshot and Watchetts Road. Okay? They had free parking all day. It meant you couldn't get a space during the day, or it was very hard to do so. And introducing charging after a free period resolved this. I haven't visited the car parks in Chobham and Bagshot. I've visited the one in Bagshot in Watchetts Road, and it's a lot easier to park when you don't want to go and get some school uniform than it used to be. I think we also need to think about what priority we give to cars and the intrinsic assumption that do nothing means. Do nothing means we continue with a policy that financially subsidises people driving to Frimley Green and parking all day. Is that really what we want? Or do we want to adopt a policy that nudges behaviour in a different direction? I think long term, what we'll see as staff churn through our businesses in Frimley Green, there'll be a different profile. It won't be someone who drives 10 miles there and parks all day for free and drives 10 miles back. They'll start recruiting people who can walk to the businesses. It will nudge behaviour in a different direction. So I accept there's uncertainty and concern about the impact on residential streets of such a change, particularly in the short term, and we won't know exactly what the impact will be until we make the change. But the only certainty, I think, is if we don't make a change, we just guarantee that car park continues not to work for residents. So I support the change that the Executive voted through on the 25th of January.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. It's fairly evident, Councillor Black, that you've never visited the car park in Chobham, because I can always find a car parking space in there. So even with the 2 hours free car parking, there is always a space for me to park. The only exception to that was a Saturday morning when there was a very special event that was on at the cricket club, when in fact there was a little bit of congestion and people struggled to park. But that particular event actually lasted for slightly less than an hour. It was a particular match, and that was one of the things that created a problem. So please do not make assumptions about an area of which you evidently have very little knowledge or understanding. In terms of displaced car parking, in terms of, please let me finish. In terms of displaced parking, we can't displace the parking from the car park in Chobham, because with the exclusion of half a dozen car parking spaces in Chobham High Street, which have a very short waiting time, we have double yellow lines in order to try and speed the traffic through our village. In terms of encouraging people and giving priority to cars, if we had any form of decent public transport, then I'm sure that the residents would take an alternative route to reach the village or to go to other places in order to support those businesses. But actually what we're doing here and what we're trying to evidence here is that we absolutely give priority to something other than cars, and that is the site of special scientific interest which surrounds our village. Chobham and Windlesham Ward is the largest geographical ward in the borough. And by I mean largest, please, any one of you, evidently you don't walk to canvass in my area, because traditionally, other than independent councillors, there's been very little success in that area. And that's because to do 12 houses, we have to walk 1.5 miles. So we are an enormous ward with no public transport, with very limited on-street car parking, because we are used as a rat run to move people from one built-up area to another. And when we come to looking at comparisons and car parking charges, I notice that we've used areas in our report such as Hartley Whitney and large essential village, what I would call a mini town, nothing like the villages that we're talking about here. East Horsley, no charge. Horsell, no charge. Ash Vale, it's £1 for an entire day. So we've been very selective with where we've made our comparisons. As I said, we are not even objecting strongly to the 400% increase. I'm quite sure that if the council was to consider putting a 400% increase on any other charges in any other area, there would be an absolute outcry. We accept that we need to make revenue from car parking. But what is not being taken into consideration is that villages are very different to Camberley Town Centre and larger areas. We have very limited shops. We have a dispersed elderly population, and most of them use the village car park. We're not even objecting to, charging after 3 hours. What we're saying, and the strongest argument, certainly from my perspective, is about the Chobham Sangs. And there was a point that was made by Councillor Tedder, which the executive do not seem to have considered, and that is that with other Sangs areas, within the management costs, there is a management cost for the car park that they need to provide in order to meet the requirement that goes with the Natural England requirements in order to have it. We've not even looking at a contribution from the Sangs contribution in order to keep that 2-hour free car parking. We absolutely, evidently do know that when they introduced car parking charges on the common, people stopped going. And the same can absolutely be argued in reverse, that at the point that we introduce additional car parking charges in that central area, people will go elsewhere, and the place that they will go elsewhere is onto the SSI. We're literally just coming into the bird nesting season. It's a very special place. Councillor Dugan, should you ever require any more than a half-hour walk, then please do leave your dogs at home, make sure that you stick to the paths, and go for a walk on Chobham Common. It's a beautiful, fantastic, and very special place. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, your passion comes out so well, and rightly so. Thank you. Councillor Batten, then Councillor Deitch.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. It's just that it's seeming not working. Councillor Black, as he drives past, complains about, or makes the comment that the car park is full. If you actually try and go in there and park, it's not a problem. It is full. It's full of people that work there in Frimley Green, but there are enough spaces for people to come and go. Councillor Dugan stated that the fees were set in 2009. I think they were set at 0. People who use the car park at night are residents, and people who use the car park during the day are people who work in Frimley Green, providing the services to local residents. Local residents do not need to use the car park very much because they can walk there, but they can't. The people that are giving the services, and when those services are gone, they are gone. And once they are gone, let me be in no doubt whatsoever, the people that cost the residents of Frimley Green their local services, their dentists, their local shops, it will be made clear who you were. The fact that everything is bundled together, town centre, Chobham Common, Frimley Green, is ludicrous. Look at what the needs of the communities are and then make your decisions, not conjugate Camberley Town Centre and the fact that you can go for a 100-yard walk and find a free place with an area that is stuck for car parking space to serve those businesses that are providing services to the local people. Once the service is gone, it's gone. Think about that a little bit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Batten.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure. Councillor Betton's point on the Frimley Green car park, the Wharf Road car park, I wasn't going to speak on any other ward other than my own, but it's impossible to park there if you're using the shops there. And plenty of residents outside of the village, Councillor Betton, do use Frimley Green car park at Wharf Road. And it is virtually impossible to park there any time during working hours. So I do completely agree with Councillor Black as far as that's concerned. Councillor Bates, you know, on the consultation point that you made, actually the executive did listen to feedback from, it did take a questionnaire that I put out and was supported by quite a lot of councillors from across the borough for them to listen, but they did. They deferred the decision. And as a result of that, actually, as a result of the feedback, as you alluded to, we got the proposals for deep cut abandoned, but also for Frimley Green, a 3-hour period, which my understanding wasn't the original proposal. So, you know, the executive have listened to some feedback that has been given from residents and ward members, even if it may have been slightly under duress. Now, my only observation, though, for Frimley Green is that most of the car parking used there during the day is by people who work in the village. And yes, I share the concerns that have been expressed that may get displaced elsewhere. But actually, those businesses this is my observation, that those businesses there don't operate on the same level playing field as everyone else from a job market point of view. So, for instance, and this is going to be very unpopular with council officers and members probably, but my suggestion would be so that they are operating on a level playing field, that we address our car parking charges here at Knoll Road that we all currently enjoy free of charge, whether that's in council meetings or otherwise. That needs looking at, actually, so that the businesses, you know, that we're lauding on those businesses that they've now got, their staff have now got to pay. We should be doing the same, I would suggest. And I know that's going to be unpopular, but you know, we ought to lead by example. So there would be my comments. I do recognise the issues that have been raised by Councillor Dugan as the portfolio holder in terms of the costs that these car parks place on the taxpayer because they're subsidised. That needs addressing. We haven't had the courage, I don't think, over the previous years to put up parking charges when perhaps we should have done. And it's regrettable that we're in this position now, but I also, like Councillor Black, support the executive position now that they've changed their minds from the original proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deitch. Let me ask Councillor Chapman first, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to speak about the town centre car parks.
No, I'd rather not, because we agreed that this particular one, we're going to stick to the 4 points. I want to
say, and it has been brought up, Chairman, and I think perhaps I should be able to speak on it, that years ago, not because we haven't put the car parks up in the town centre, the fees for quite a while. Years ago, we would have that on an agenda every year, annually, and we would get the comparisons from likewise, Woking, Guildford, you name it, all around here, Farnborough. And we nearly always put it up with inflation, like those other car parks did. And now you look at those car parks around us, Woking, they're astronomical compared with us. So that might...
Councillor Chapman, with all due respect, we are trying to stick to the points raised and the call.
Well, no, this was brought up, Chairman, about...
I did, and I said we're moving on from that point. We don't want to be going back.
No, I think it was brought up, Chairman, about the increases on the town centres. We did it annually, and I think perhaps, and Chief Executive here, we should perhaps start looking at that again. I will now go back to rural and even other areas in the villages. I think we've got to get things into perspective here. We're looking at 50 pence, maybe, change between 1 hour and 2 hours. Now, here's an example. If, and I don't do this, but I know other people do, if I was to go to one of the villages and to the hairdressers for an hour, I can get a lot done. If I want something extra done to my hair, which these days can be anything from £30 to £80. Would you, yes, it's astronomical, but lots of people do it. That's the way they spend their money. Would 50 pence, even if it was £1, with that in mind, would it make that much difference to you going locally to the hairdressers? That's just a simple example here. We're talking 50 pence. I've had my say. And what I would say about places like Chobham and the car park, we go there for the cricket club, our club visits there. We would willingly pay £2 or £3 on a Sunday. Day out for us at that cricket club is absolutely wonderful. And elsewhere we go. We would pay to visit those grounds and the cricket club.
Yes. Councillor Chapman, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to come back on a few things that have been discussed. Firstly, it was that when Councillor Dugan mentioned that during the consultation of the 5-year plan, parking charges weren't raised. Well, that's because the parking charges weren't being suggested were going to be raised. And if we go back to 2009, when the last time car parking charges were raised, that's over 10 years ago, maybe residents weren't overly concerned that they were thinking that their car parking charges were going to be increased, that's why they didn't raise it. They were very happy with the provision they actually had. I am really concerned beyond just I know that we've seemed to have narrowed this down to the Chobham car park and Wharf Road, but I do actually believe that this will cause people to avoid the car parks. And while it's been raised that the car parks are currently not operating very well at the car parks, I can guarantee that if we put car parking charges on and people don't go to those car parks will continue to not operate as an effective car park. I take the point that the enforcement officers go there once a day, but then again, there is nothing to stop residents from going into a car park and parking for free and chancing it. People, if the enforcement officers go at a similar time every day, people will soon learn habits of when enforcement officers go. If they go at random times, that's good and that's great. But that's what I would request enforcement officers to do, to go at random times every day, not to go at Wharf Road we go at 9 o'clock and we go at the next one at 10 o'clock, because people will soon learn the routines. My other concern is regarding the use of the increasing revenue that this will be bringing in. I think it's quite clear that from the answers that Councillor Dugan's given and the information that has been provided, and obviously maybe I was not clear enough on my call-in sheet, I would have liked itemised expenses regarding each car park, because I think if we are increasing the charges to run those car parks, I think we should see what is being spent on each thing to warrant that. So clearly, I think it's quite clear is that while a minimal amount of this revenue will go to the car parks, the rest of it will just go into the whole of the budget deficit. And I understand the council has to make money and the council has to find that gap. And I think the political decision not to raise car parking charges is now coming home to roost. And I also just want to address the point that Councillor Garrett raised regarding regular consultation with ward councillors. Is that such a bad idea? Is it such a bad idea that the council actually engages with the members that understand the local area that they represent? Obviously, there are times when the executive has to act. Obviously, there are times when the executive has to act without consultation. But again, car parking charges haven't been raised since 2009. I mean, I was 20 in 2009. I wasn't even a member of this council. That's a long time. People have, I believe that residents have come to expect the car parks charging as they are. And I think they could have accepted modest increases every year, but that's not what's happened. And I do take issue with the fact that it's just a 50p increase. We need to look at Watchet's Road car park, which is the existing tariff is 2 free hours. So it's now going up by £1. That's £1 for 2 hours. So it's not just a 50p increase. These are very varied. So I think we actually do need to have a more holistic approach to this. And I would endorse the comments made by others that we actually need to separate the village car parks away from the town centre car park. I agree. And I think I would impress upon Councillor Dugan as the representative of the Executive Committee to take this back, to review the village car parks with specific looking at Wharf Road and Chobham as the two that have been identified as the primary ones. I would also recommend looking at Watchetts Road car park. While obviously that does not provide free at the existing, the proposed increases are relatively substantial. For example, 3 hours is going up by £1.10, 4 hours is going up by £1.20, 5 hours is going up by £1.30. So that, while some of us may be able to afford that, if you were doing that on a daily basis, that does increase costs. And residents and employees, yes, it will lead. So people who work in our villages and in our shops, that will be increased pressure on them, because most people who work in retail don't often get paid that much. So I do hope that the executive do review this. But yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Betton, did you want to come back on anything? I saw your hand up for a few minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make the point that as far as the dentist in Frimley Green is concerned, their estimate of their increased cost is over £10,000 per annum. I would also point out that it seems to me to be that I can find a space to park in Wharf Road car park, whereas Councillors Black and Deach cannot. But as Councillor Deach suggested, that everything should be on a level playing field, is he supporting the imposition of parking charges in Deep Cut after all?
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Betton. Councillor Bates.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm probably at the stage where I want to make a recommendation, but no, okay, fine. So I'm just going to make a couple of comments. Fine, okay, fine. So I'll just make a couple of comments then in regard to what I've heard. I mean, firstly, this point about it's somewhat ironic sitting here tonight and having comments said, which many of us have said over the last few years about, oh, it's only 50p. Well, that's what we've been arguing for many, many years, and members of the Conservative group were the ones saying, oh, no, we can't do that. We have to keep putting this off. We can't make a decision. And now all of a sudden tonight we hear, oh, it's only 50p. This could and should have been dealt with gradually. It wasn't, for whatever reason. I appreciate some of the people are not here and we have to make a decision now. But I do think this historically has not been dealt with well. I appreciate that isn't Councillor Dugan's fault. He can only deal with what he is able to deal with in his portfolio now. In terms of just one point that we haven't covered but has been raised by Councillor Rice about the convenience fees, I personally have no objection to passing that on to the customer. They do that where I work in Farnham, so it costs me 10 pence or 20 pence, irrespective of that fee. I do take the point he makes that there should be perhaps an opportunity for somebody to get that without having to pay the charge. So I think it's an important point he makes, but on balance, I think that should be a customer charge rather than a council charge. That's my view. It's not something I feel strongly about, so I'll leave it there, really. I think, to me, though, that the basic problem that we have with this is that I have an issue about interfering in someone else's village car park. Now, whether I used to represent Watchetts, or whether it's Frimley Green, or whether it's Bagshot, or whether it's Chobham, and to me, the ward members know those areas. So we've heard from the Chobham members they're upset about that and given very good reasons, and I think we should listen to that. In Frimley Green, there's obviously differences of view, so I think the executive should consider that, and it may be that they, having considered that, take on board Councillor Black's comments or Councillor Betton's comments, whichever. But again, they know more than me about that. In Watchetts, neither of the Watchetts councillors have called this matter in. So irrespective of what I might think about that car park and what Councillor Rice thinks about it, they obviously don't believe there's a problem. So I can't sit here and honestly say we should be calling in that car park. But I have heard good argument raised about 2 car parks. So to me, I would want to say, they are the elected people for their area, and they've given specific local reasons as to why those local car parks, and only those local car parks, need to be reviewed further. Other councillors in other areas have said, no, we think it's the right decision. In Bagshot and others, fair enough. I'm not going to sit here and argue about Bagshot because they know better than me. But to me, I think this does need looking at for those two, very clearly those two, not for the others. I think we've covered that in detail, but these two, I think the executive should look at. The amount of money, by the way, that we are now discussing is not £290,000. It's around £33,000. As has been raised a couple of times, and as I raised at the meeting, one way that that could be easily recuperated, in fact, far more than £33,000, is through looking at Sunday charging. And in fact, other councillors have even mentioned that for their own car parks tonight. So this, to me, is not a financial decision. It is purely a matter of whether or not you want to insist in communities that don't want it, and their elected representatives are saying they don't want it, the ones who live there and work there, whether they should be forced to have these charges. And to me, I don't think so. I wouldn't want that in my community, and I'm not going to inflict it in theirs either.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, if you can, we already sort of I'm trying to wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll be very, very quick. Watchers, I'm delighted to see that the timing, as a frequent shopper there, it is quite irritating when I'm trying to sort of go and get my fish and beef that I can't park. So a churn is great news. But I know Councillor Bates used to represent that area. At the risk of incurring the wrath of Councillor Wheeler, can I just outline some... she's looking at me. I've done a bit of research in the absence of any witnesses, and I've looked at 4 councils as to what they're doing. Elmbridge, which is run a coalition of the Liberal Democrats and residents, they're increasing their charges. Guildford, Lib Dems, and a host of others. I mean, they've got a lot of problems in Guildford. I mean, they've had to hand money back they haven't used, increasing charges. Waverley, Lib Dems and Farnham residents, increasing charges. Mole Valley, which is a Liberal Democrat-controlled council, very interesting here. They are having 30 minutes.
Councillor Hawkins, I really would like to keep this non-partisan, if you don't mind.
If you let me finish, we'll get to the point. Thank you, Chairman. Mole Valley, they are restricting 30-minute free car parking across their area, and it's fragmented into a number of different places. And to pick up a very early point from Councillor Rice, they're actually charging for Ringo. Because I know you were objecting to that initially. But as far as Councillor Bates' point, I totally agree we should be charging on Sundays. There should be no change, and there should be no differential, because it's now a recognised shopping day. Thank you for your perseverance, Chairman.
Councillor Hawkins, it's a general rule, if I'm chairing a meeting, it should never become partisan, because it's got to be neutral. We are working for the residents of the entire borough. So please don't make it a partisan job within this particular committee.
Point of correction, Chairman. Councillor Bates has mentioned that it was the Conservatives that just said something. Councillor Betton has been making threats. So, I think I feel justified in responding on that basis. Thank you.
She was specifically named, and then you were named.
Chairman, we don't have that rule. I was informed that having been named, we can't respond when you're being named. With the Chief Executive sitting there, will no doubt confirm that.
Councillor Hawkins, this is my committee. I make the rules as I go along, as I see fit.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Hawkins on doing some research before a meeting. It's very encouraging. However, had he extended his research a little bit further, I would be really grateful to know which other areas charge for their Sangs car parks. And obviously it's a little bit like statistics, isn't it? The beauty of research, the beauty of quoting things, the beauty of statistics is that you can pretty much choose whatever it is that suits your point. However, evidently, I have looked extensively to see where else charges for SANGs, in the same way that I have looked beyond the villages that fitted the executive report that said that villages were making charges to car parks. All of these things are open to interpretation. The one thing that isn't open to interpretation is that I cannot find, and I would welcome the opportunity to be corrected, I cannot find another SANGs area that charges for car parking.
Councillor Wheeler, thank you very much. Councillor Rice, if you can, I genuinely want to get to recommendations.
No,
so
it's
thank
very
you.
quick. I'll just say it's very lucky then that I'm not a councillor in Mole Valley or Guildford or Elmbridge or wherever, because I wouldn't be making these very same points. The fact is I'm standing up for the Surrey, as we all are, we stand up for Surrey Heath Borough residents. And the use of using another council to score a political point is a bit below the belt. I haven't done that. All I've made is comments regarding that it was a political decision of this council not to raise prices over the last 11 or however many years. But now, again, as I said, if I was a member of those councils, I would be making the exact same points now. And it's thankful that the Liberal Democrats don't demand their councillors all subscribe to the same opinion.
Councillor Rice, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm actually going to move on to the final part, which is, are there any points of clarification at this point? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. They've swapped it around. It's far too confusing for me. I think we're at the point that we would like to make a recommendation.
Yes, absolutely.
And certainly from my point of view, I would like to recommend, I welcome...
All right, can we make a note of all this and then go for it? Yeah? Yes, go for it. Go for it.
Can I go for it? Thank you. I would like to... I'm not going to consider other people's areas. I'm going to be incredibly partisan. I'm referred just to Chobham Common, and I'm sure that my fellow councillors will come in on other points for which they know their area better and are therefore much better informed.
Sorry, before we carry on, we are actually at this point, okay? My note says, yes, A, B, and C, which is fundamentally one, to accept the original decision. I'm just making this going. We have to follow the rules. Here, I've been given a list. Point B says, accept the original decision, but add informative to submit to the decision maker. Point C, not to accept the original decision, in which case it can refer the decision back to the executive or decision maker with recommendations. 2, subsection to refer the decision to the council if it considers a decision is contrary to the budget and policy framework. Finally, refer it to the council if it considers the consequences will be significant. Yes? So make a choice and go for it.
I would like to recommend the third option, that we do not accept the decision that was made by the executive, and we go back to the executive with alternative proposals. So I don't know if we have to accept that as a committee group first, and then we come forward with a proposal. Is that the correct order? Lovely. So I don't know if I have a seconder for that.
I'd like to second that.
So, for the record, proposer is Councillor Wheeler, seconder is Councillor Rice.
Is everyone in agreement with that?
All in favour? You're the guru on Constitution, go for it.
I am, but it's just to clarify in my own head, really. As I understand, at least my understanding of the discussion, is that much of the original decision is not being contested at this point, but there are elements that are, hence why Councillor Wheeler has asked for item CI, I believe, referring the matter back to the executive or decision maker recommendations. That's correct, is it? Yes, it is. Okay, so am I right in saying, therefore, that we can refer back part of the decision? Correct. So Catherine is giving me a nod.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, yes. So in which case, are you at this point going to ask for clarification, perhaps from Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Rice, as to which parts of the decision you wish to refer back? Because the rest of it will be accepting the original decision, I believe.
Would you like me to clarify, Chair? So I I am just looking specifically to call in question the car parking charges that relate to Chobham Village car park. And I believe that the other car park that is under consideration is Wharf Road. So I am recommending that we accept the decision of the executive with the exception of those points that relate to Wharf Road car park and Chobham Village car park.
Second.
I'm going to put it to the vote now. All in favour of this? Anyone against? Unanimous, yes? It's a unanimous decision. Thank you.
So, sorry, just to confirm, Councillor Lewis substituted for Councillor Deach. So we've not counted Councillor Deach in that vote.
Did you vote, Councillor Lewis?
I would have done, yes, but because Councillor
Yeah.
Deach put his hand up, I assumed he was no valid.
Oh, Councillor Dugan.
Okay,
Councillor
yeah,
Deach can't vote in.
I'll put my hand up, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So I would, Councillor Mavaganam, I would like to make the recommendation that we, as Councillor Dugan has already alluded, that we accept that we delay the decision until we have a consultation back from Natural England, from Surrey Wildlife Trust, and until we have explored the possibility of looking at the recovering some of the income. And I would call into question whether or not we know what income realistically we will achieve from the introduction of the 2 hours, because we simply do not have the evidence to know how many people use 1 hour of that car parking and how many people use 2 hours of that car parking. But actually, we look to have a SANGS contribution to offset the introduction of the additional hours car parking in line with other SANGS areas within the borough. And that those figures and that information come back in full to the executive before they make their decision. And I will look to Councillor Rice, it's contagious, to come to look for the wording around Wharf Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My recommendation regarding Wharf Road would be that the decision be delayed and consultation with ward councillors and residents in the immediate vicinity of Wharf Road car park be consulted.
Chairman, can we just clarify, by residents, do we mean retail shopkeepers and offices, or those people that live in houses? Because there are a number of houses with gardens and drives in the immediate vicinity of Wharf Road, I'm aware of. I just really wanted to narrow it down, otherwise we'll be consulting with everybody, people who have a garage and what have you.
It's a valid point, Councillor Rice.
I say residents, that means residents, in my opinion. I haven't mentioned retail in the consultation.
That's what I was looking for the clarification on.
I would like to, but I'm not sure what that, if that's within that's what the council would do. So that's why I've said residents.
We have to be careful. If you say residents, are you talking the entire Frimley Green?
That's why I said residents in the immediate vicinity of the Wharf Road car park.
Okay,
And
the immediate... Sorry, that poses another question. Immediate vicinity.
Okay, within... Half-mile radius.
Half-mile.
I mean,
Okay,
it
that's
says I'm
as long as we
required to be
define it.
subjective here. So a half-mile radius of the car park,
As long as
and with ward councillors.
Thank you very much. As long as we define it. Councillor Black.
Half-mile radius is probably most of Frimley Green, that's 5,000 residents. So that's one point. Second point, the moot point really seems to be, is that car park at capacity or not? So my suggestion of the recommendation, we go back and check the data, and we publish the data. And if there's a need to gather more data, we do that. But from what I've heard, I believe the data's already there to clarify that point.
Let me also get Councillor Betton's view. I thought you had your hand up there, Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Chair. I would emphasise the importance of speaking to the businesses, because it's the businesses that are going to be most affected, and it's them that are providing the services that will be lost. So if you ask residents who's got a parking space on their drive, do you mind about Wharf Road car park? Well, no, we don't. You ask residents if they mind about losing the local dentist, then yes, they probably do. So it's not a simple question. And that is, I think, the point and the whole issue that we're dealing with here.
Councillor Betton, Councillor Rice.
If I'm allowed to make a change to my recommendation, I actually take Councillor Black's point regarding the half-mile radius of Frimley Green. That probably would be a significant. I use that because that's what Councillor Wheeler said in my ear, and that's a number I just said.
I've got no idea.
Half a mile in Windlesham and Chobham is probably 3 people. Half a mile, yeah. So I would amend my recommendation to consult with the businesses within the Frimley Green village and residents within a 10-minute walking radius of Wharf Road car park. Okay.
No, I take your point.
Can I then leave immediate vicinity to the expertise of the professional officers to make a judgment call?
I think that's a better way to put it, because I don't want to take a flippant view and say how fast can they walk or slow or run. So I think we will leave it to the officers, yes, to decide the radius, because, I mean, you've got to be reasonable here, Mr. Lee, yes? Not 10 feet, make it sensible. I shall leave that to you and your director of report, yes? Mr. Stevens, to deal with this. Thank you. Are we all in agreement with these recommendations? Okay, vote, please. Right, unanimous again? Yes? Yes. You can't double vote. We hope we know what you're doing now, and the officers, I hope you know what you have to do as well. It's been a long day, long evening, I must admit. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Excellent debate, very passionate.